Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Sunday, September the 6th, 2020.
Rentals, food, unemployment assistance, tens of millions struggling Americans, student loan relief, small business support, and aid to schools and state governments that are going bankrupt. And as long as this pandemic and the accompanying economic catastrophe persist, no one should have their water or power cut off because they can't afford to pay the bill. Bottom line, Mr. President, do your job. Get off your golf course and out of the sand bunker. Call the leaders together in the Oval Office. Sit with them and make a deal. Make a deal that delivers for working Americans and eases their anxiety and pain. In July, I laid out my Build Back Better plan for an economy that works for everyone. Over the next 3 weeks, I'll be laying out the sharp contrast my plan has with the president's non-plans. I'll be asking the American people 3 basic questions. Who can handle the pandemic? Who can keep their promises? And who cares about and will fight for working families?
Do your job. That was Joe Biden on Friday in Wilmington, Delaware, talking about Donald Trump. Surely the laziest person ever to inhabit the White House. On this episode of The Politicrat, some more audio from Joe Biden, who spoke on Friday in Wilmington. He spoke not only about the story that you all know about, his response to Donald Trump's ugly, inhumane comments about American soldiers, but also the thing that did not get played in the media, the audio that Joe Biden gave on the economy, plus his plans to revive the economy and revive jobs in the United States. Also, more information about voting, very important information about voting, and a word from a president that many of you really respect and admire, that is no longer in the office. Guess who it might be? All of that coming up next. Welcome back. On Friday, Joe Biden made comments in Wilmington, Delaware. He was addressing the issue of the economy and how bad the economy has been and has tanked under Donald Trump. He also spoke briefly about Donald Trump's scathing and disrespectful comments, at best, about Americans who sacrificed their lives fighting for the United States of America. For those of you who, unless you've been under a rock, you are all aware about these comments that I'm not going to repeat, that you will hear, that I'm going to play from Joe Biden in just a moment. But I've tried to stay much away from that story because I think, although it is a story that is of interest and is important, it is really, quite frankly, if I'm brutally honest, a distraction. And it's a distraction from us getting focused on voting. And also a distraction from you remembering, which I can't imagine why you'd forget, that over 190,000 people in the United States have died from coronavirus. As I have often postulated here or expressed, you may know somebody who passed away. You may have someone in your family circle who passed away. In any event, my condolences and my heartfelt condolences to you and to family members around you on your loss, if it applies. If it doesn't apply, again, my deepest empathy, because people are going through a lot of hell. 2020 is going to go down as one of the most hellish years in a number of years, quite frankly. The focus now has to be on voting. We have to have a voting mentality, as I have been saying on a number of occasions here. And that will not change for me from now through November 3rd. It is critically important, and I mean absolutely crucial, that we really stay focused here on the job at hand, and that is to focus on voting, and voting early. I will continue to hammer that point home here on this podcast. And I hope that you do too. And I hope that you not only do it for yourselves and actually vote early, but you also make sure that you tell others that you know to vote early. Your family, your friends, people in your workplace. If you are working from home, the same thing. If you are, at an office, which will be sparse, I'm sure, at this point. But make sure that you have that mindset. It's very important. So anyway, Joe Biden on Friday, in comments that you've probably heard, did speak about what Donald Trump had to say. And I'm only going to play this once. And there's a reason for why I'm playing it. So it's about 4.5 minutes. Joe Biden in Wilmington, Delaware, 2 days ago now, talking about the comments of Donald Trump.
And the revelations about President Trump's disregard for our military and our veterans. Quite frankly, if what is written in the Atlantic is true, it's disgusting. And it affirms what most of us believe to be true. That Donald Trump is not fit to be the job of president, to be the commander-in-chief. The president reportedly said, and I emphasize reportedly said, that those who sign up to serve instead of doing something more lucrative are suckers. Let me be real clear. When my son was an assistant U.S. attorney and he volunteered to go to Kosovo while the war was going on as a civilian, he wasn't a sucker. When my son volunteered and joined the United States military as the Attorney General and went to Iraq for a year, won the Bronze Star and other commendations, he wasn't a sucker. The servicemen and women he served with, particularly those who did not come home, were not losers. If these statements are true, the president should humbly apologize to every Gold Star mother and father and every Blue Star family that he's denigrated and insulted. Who the heck does he think he is? Is it true? Well, we've heard from his own mouth his characterizations of an American hero, John McCain, as a loser in 2015. Donald Trump said he was not a war hero. I like people who weren't captured. Well, good for him. And his dismissal of the traumatic brain injury suffered by troops serving in Iraq as mere headaches not too long ago. He stood by, failing to take action or even raise the issue with Vladimir Putin, while the Kremlin puts bounties on the heads of American troops in Afghanistan. It's a sacred duty. And you're tired of hearing me say this. Those who've been covering me for years know. I get in trouble for saying, but I'm going to say it again. We have many obligations to the government. We only have one truly sacred obligation. Equip and support those who we send into harm's way, care for their families while they're gone, and care for them when they are home. That's the only truly sacred obligation the government has. Duty, honor, country. These are values that drive our service members. It's an all-voluntary outfit. President Trump has demonstrated he has no sense of service, no loyalty to any cause other than himself. And if I have the honor of being the next commander-in-chief, I will ensure that our American heroes know I'll have their backs, honor their sacrifice, and those who've been injured will be in military parades. I'm always cautioned not to lose my temper. This may be as close as I've come in this campaign. It's just a marker of how deeply President Trump and I disagree about the role of the President of the United States of America.
I totally agree with Joe Biden. They are not the things that Donald Trump has been calling them. These are brave human beings. When you put on a uniform and you take that oath, take that fealty to your country, there is nothing more patriotic than that. You are willing to risk your life, to end up losing your life or losing your limbs in service of a higher principle, your country. Country over self. It's one of the most selfless things that any human being can do, is to volunteer for their country in combat, and volunteer to the point in which they realize, every last one, that they are risking their lives, because they are risking their lives in service of a higher principle than self. And that is the country that they live in, the country that they absolutely are fighting and dying for. And that is the United States of America. Now, we can all differ about the foreign policy of the country or anything of that nature, the domestic policy of the country. But what we really can unite around is the heroism and bravery of the individuals who put their lives on the line for the country, who go 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 tours of duty in lands far, far away from here, and come back with PTSD, with limbs lost, or don't come back at all. That is the kind of thing that Donald Trump had denigrated in the article that was written in The Atlantic by Jeffrey Goldberg. It has been widely shared, and I have shared it. I'll put a link to the article as well. I'm sure you've read it. If you haven't, I'm going to put a link to it. There's so much more that has not been talked about in that article that Donald Trump has said. So you need to read that article, by the way. And by the way, the article has been corroborated 1 billion times. Even Fox News, for goodness sakes, even Fox News, their reporter there, had also corroborated the story and reported on it on Fox just on Friday. I believe it was Friday, and as have numerous publications, the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN has done so, the AP has done so, Reuters has done so, a military man who also writes for Reuters, for AP has done so. I mean, this thing has been by sources that have not yet come out of their source mode, which I doubt that they're going to do. And they've all backed this up and said, yes, Jeffrey Goldberg is correct. And besides, he has a reputation as well of being an ironclad, solid reporter. But the reason why I play that clip from Joe Biden is not because he got angry, and justifiably so, something that a lot of people in the Democratic Party were really pleased that he did, that he really raised his voice and was defiant and was angry and, slammed his hand down on the podium. I'm sure you heard that during the 4+ minutes, and actually was rolling up his sleeves, which is what, quite frankly, a number of Democratic presidential candidates or nominees have not done over the last few election cycles. We go back 4 years ago. Hillary Clinton just did not make a powerful enough and compelling enough presentation for many people, enough of whom decided to stay away, not to mention the animosity towards her and the misogyny. There's no question that those things played roles, but many things did. We go back before Obama and we go to someone like a John Kerry. He never really had that fire or that spark. But Joe Biden has. He has it. And people call him names and you hear all of that. But those names are just ridiculous. You can't really put those names on him because after what you heard on that audio clip, there's no way you can ever call him a name. He definitely had enough. And as you heard, he said, look, this is the closest I've come to losing my temper. But the reason I really play that clip is because of the institution that Donald Trump is attacking. He's attacking the military. And this is part of his and Steve Bannon, especially Steve Bannon's, plan to deconstruct the administrative state. This is something that Steve Bannon was open about. He's been open about it. And by the way, Steve Bannon, for those of you who are not scoring at home, is a racist, writes for Breitbart, or has done, maybe still does, has some editorial power there perhaps. Breitbart is an arch conservative and, quite frankly, traffics in a lot of garbage and racism as well, in my view. Breitbart is one of these staunchly right-wing hate sites, as far as I can tell. And Steve Bannon's a part of that. And Steve Bannon is someone who is a racist, a brutal racist, somebody who, again, he had a incredible, this is unbelievable, this. The reason why I play that clip, the real reason, is that it is an example, at least Donald Trump's remarks, and he's had a history of doing this. This is an example of the deconstruction of the administrative state, an attack on a cherished part of American government. Not that fighting wars is a cherished part of American government, although there's certainly enough history to suggest that it is. War is a money-making machine, everybody. I'm sure you all understand that. We all understand that. But what I'm saying is that the institution of having a military presence is something that is important to the infrastructure of the country. Now, I may not agree with the foreign policy, and I may not agree with some of the fundamental things that the United States has done around the world. Oh my goodness gracious me, this country has has upended any number of democracies all around the world. Oh my God. How much time do you have? I could go on for a good 2 hours talking about all the ones that have been upended by this country's government. But what I'm talking about here is this denigration of service to the country by the person in the White House. That is not something that you see every day. And so people should be looking at those comments a little bit deeper, those comments by Trump a little deeper than, well, he's had a history of doing this, which is what I just said. This was not talked about in the corporate news media. This is about an attack on an institution within government. Clearly a sign that fascism is really here and that this guy is a fascist. If you're starting to attack government institutions, that is a road to tyranny. Steve Bannon, the racist, who is out quoting the Turner Diaries and wanting all kinds of racist things to happen in this country and all kinds of wars and race war. Steve Bannon has talked about all of this. Bannon is the same racist Steve Bannon who was given a national security clearance by Donald Trump. Would you believe? Yes, it actually happened. He was in National Security Council meetings before he eventually got kicked out by Jared Kushner, who basically told Donald Trump, you've got to make a decision here. It's either him or me, and you're not going to piss off your daughter and tell her husband and Donald Trump's son-in-law to get lost. So Steve Bannon drew the shorter straw there and was booted out of the White House. He, of course, was arrested last month, if you can remember, and I'm sure you do remember. He was arrested last month on charges of fraud. He will have a court date at some point. But it was Steve Bannon who openly boasted and bragged about, our goal here with Donald Trump is to deconstruct the administrative state. And when you think about it, that's exactly what's been happening over the last 4 years. Donald Trump has spoken ill of the military on a number of occasions. Donald Trump, back in 2008, during the summer of that year in Helsinki, Finland, with the summit meeting with Vladimir Putin and the infamous press conference that came out of that, where he sided with Vladimir Putin, an enemy of the United States. Russia is an enemy of the United States. And Donald Trump, the American, was siding with America's enemy and praising Vladimir Putin. You remember all of that just 2 years ago now. And saying that the United States has been foolish. That was coming out of the mouth of the guy who is in the White House. Donald Trump actually said that on the world stage. I think the United States has been foolish. Now that is clear evidence of somebody who hates America. What person who occupies the position in the White House, who is the commander-in-chief, says that about his own country? And not only says it about his own country, but says it about his own country in front of the world, for all the world to see. Humiliating the United States on the world stage. And not only that, taking Putin's side over the United States intelligence agencies. This is part of the deconstruction of the administrative state. When you are attacking United States agencies, intelligence agencies, and you're siding with your enemy. When you allow Vladimir Putin to put bounties on the heads of United States military personnel, and at least 26 of them get killed because of those bounties and because that you sit back and do absolutely nothing. You do nothing to rein Russia in at all. For the same reason, it's a deconstruction of the administrative state when in 2017, you invited Sergei Kislyak and another Russian official, maybe at least one or two other Russian officials, to the White House, and you kick out the American press. Hello, the Fourth Estate is gone, the First Amendment's gone. And it's only Russian press, and you allow only the Russian press into the White House to cover this event where you, Donald Trump, are in the White House and you're sharing classified secrets with the Russians? Yes, that really happened. I am not making that up. You can go to the Washington Post about this. That is an example of being a traitor to your country. That is an example, in my view, of deconstructing the administrative state. When you are sharing highly classified secrets with your enemy, with your adversary, your enemy, that is unforgivable. And that's way before the impeachment. I mean, we're talking about so many different instances in which Donald Trump has deconstructed the administrative state along with people in his administration, like Steve Bannon, who's no longer there, like Stephen Miller, who is presently there. So people are talking about, well, how dare he say these things about Americans and American soldiers? And yes, we should have outrage about that. But the real deal that is going on underneath all of that is this continuation of undermining, subverting, and deconstructing the administrative state. This is the goal of this so-called administration, which is really a crime family on the rampage. And so far, I hate to say it, but they are succeeding. Whether it's the post office, another deconstruction, we're now going to try to privatize. And by the way, the Republicans have been wanting to do this for a number of years. Now you want to slow down the mail. You're slowing down the mail at Donald Trump's behest. And then you're doing that to privatize the post office and also, of course, to curtail the democratic process by slowing down the mail. That's a felony. Then you're telling people, well, you can vote twice. Well, if you can go mail in your vote. And then, you can just go down to the precinct in person just to ask them to make sure that they've counted it. And if they haven't counted it yet, then the process hasn't worked. Then you vote again. This guy is nakedly deconstructing the administrative state here. And the media, the corporate news media, is not going to talk about it like that. I mean, you might have a pundit or two glance by it if you're lucky. But in the corporate news media, they are not going to talk about it the way I'm talking about it, or the way some people in progressive media are talking about it, like Tom Hartman, like Randy Rhodes, like others. Like someone like Roland Martin. I mean, the simple fact is that you cannot take these things in isolation, is my point. This is a deconstruction when you're now attacking the voting process. Oh, it's rigged. And he's been doing this for years. Oh, it's rigged. And if I didn't win, that means it's rigged. That means the idea is that only you can win. That's what he's saying to you. Oh, if I don't win, that means it's rigged. But if you do win, it's not. That's what he's telling you. Then he's telling people in North Carolina, as I said, well, you can go and mail in your ballot and go in person and check to see if they've tabulated yet. Well, first of all, many of the states don't tabulate their ballots until Election Day. Some begin to tabulate them before. I alluded to that in yesterday's episode, although I wasn't as exact or as clear as I should have been, which is I said that they would have them counted before Election Day. They would start counting before Election Day. That's the slight correction to what I said in yesterday's episode. But the fact of the matter is that he knows this. And what he's doing, if you really read between the lines and listen with a third ear, when he says go and check to see if the ballot has been counted, what he's really saying is go to the polling station and intimidate people. Intimidate the elections officials who've got a hell of a lot on their plate as it is, and intimidate people who may be voting. That's what that's all about, and that is all about deconstructing the administrative state. Now you're trying to intimidate people who work at the Board of Elections in all these states. I mean, this is really clear. Now, the media, again, the corporate news media is not talking about it like this, but that is exactly what is going on. Whether it's the post office, whether it's voting, whether it's the military that he's attacking, whether it's the press, the First Amendment, he's attacking the First Amendment of the Constitution. Whether it's his and his administration's refusal to answer subpoenas, that's part of the responsibility of Congress, is to issue those subpoenas if they want to have some hearings, and they need to compel the executive branch to be present at those hearings, what they will do is send a subpoena. And last year, during the impeachment investigation, which started around this time, if not maybe about a month or so after, just 1 year ago, when the Speaker of the House sends that letter out, and then you as an executive branch member say, no, we're not responding to your subpoena, take your subpoena and shove it, essentially, that is part of the deconstruction of the administrative state. Because no one defies subpoenas if they're smart, or unless they are dangerous. That's the only way they'll do it. And this group is dangerous. Not divesting from his businesses. I mean, these are all things that people who are in the White House do and have done by a matter of tradition and course. It's not a law so much, but it is a problem. It's a huge problem. This guy has broken any number of laws while he's been in office, and also certainly committed unconstitutional acts. Again, this chipping away at what America's foundation is in terms of its governmental structure. That is why I played that clip. Joe Biden coming down hard on that. But even in his clip that I played, that clip, he didn't extend it to what I'm talking about. Hopefully he will at the debates. In fact, Joe Biden, a few months ago, during the early stages or the mid stages of this pandemic, did talk about these kinds of things, actually, when he said that he wants to have an election delayed, which Donald Trump ended up saying. That's all part of this deconstructing the administrative state, leaving the average American feeling confused, feeling disoriented, not knowing what to do. So that's really what that clip operates to serve. I mean, of Biden responding to it. But the point is, without playing what Donald Trump has said, because you can find that on YouTube everywhere, what he said about John McCain, what he said about John Dingell, and many others, what he did denigrating Maisha Johnson when he totally denigrated her late husband, who was killed in action in Niger in 2017. Couldn't even remember the young man's name. His name is LaDavid Johnson. So these are just but a few examples of this deconstructing the administrative state. Of course, I didn't even mention the impeachment. What he was trying to do there. I just want to say to Joe Biden, well done on firmly and forcefully calling out the garbage of Donald Trump. I just want to take this time to thank you all for listening to the Politicrat podcast every day, and also for the comments that you have made about the podcast. And if you do like the podcast, please subscribe. Please tell all your friends and family. Let the world know that the Politicrat is here daily for you, for information, for lots of food for thought, and the occasional chuckle here and there. You can follow me, Omar Moore, at The Popcorn, REEL, on Twitter. And you can also find me just about anywhere else. But really the first place to start is on Twitter, at The Popcorn, REEL. Thank you so much. And really, I really appreciate you listening to The Politicrat.
At some point, Trump starts talking about the great intelligence he gets. He's telling his visitors, I get the best briefings, I get the best intelligence, and proceeds to talk about this threat that is underway that has been actually publicly talked about for some time. But he goes into details about the specifics of this plot and how it's coming together and what the Islamic State is doing to try to pull this off. And the problem is that the United States knows much of this information because of intelligence that came from a partner, another country.
The partner had not given the US permission to share any of the material with Russia. That's what that says. You can't see it, but I'm reading it to you. Officials said Trump's actions could jeopardize cooperation from an ally with access to the inner workings of the Islamic State. Officials expressed concerns with Trump's handling of sensitive information as well as his grasp of political consequences. They said the exposure of this intelligence to the IS could hinder the ability to detect future threats.
You have his own National Security Council staff members, senior officials who see readouts of what happened. They call the CIA director, call the NSA chief to warn them, look, something happened in this meeting with the Russians we need to tell you about. This is in part because they're alarmed and concerned about the blowback. These are agencies, the CIA, that would be directly communicating or dealing with this foreign partner, and they would be most concerned about that relationship going south.
I mean, that's as much as I'm really going to play to you. Why should I even bother going any further? I mean, this is a really dangerous thing. That was from the Washington Post, May the 15th, 2017. Greg Miller speaking there. That's the voice you heard, the male voice. And the headline from this Washington Post article is Trump revealed highly classified information to Russian foreign minister and ambassador. Greg Miller, as you just heard there, and Greg Jaffe, they wrote that story dated May the 15th, 2017. And as I was saying just before the break, is that, this is the example of a deconstruction of the administrative state, certainly the protocol of the state, and the protocol of how you deal with these sensitive matters as well. Here's another instance of it. Someone who calls himself the commander-in-chief does not throw the American press out of the White House at a press event and allow only the Russian press to be present, and then have the two Russians, Kislyak, who, by the way, is connected to all of this 2016 campaign wrongdoings. Remember the Mueller report and now this Senate Intelligence Committee report, which is a Republican report, 966 pages. It came out last month that showed how knee-deep Russia and Trump are in it together. Regarding the 2016 election, he invites Sergei Kislyak in there. Kislyak is one of the main freaking players in this whole scam of, stealing this election in 2016. He's one of the big players. And Trump has invited him, along with Sergei Lavrov, who is the foreign minister in Russia. Just the two of them talking to Trump in the White House, and Trump has just given them all this highly classified information. I mean, if that's not a Manchurian candidate, I don't know what is or who is. So I just wanted to just bookend the conversation from that first block about this guy destroying things. He is destroying this country from within and making it extraordinarily vulnerable. We've seen the all the attacks by Russia now. Russia is also encouraging, through social media, this denigration of the voting process. You had someone on Twitter just a day ago lying about California. Oh, California, they're sending out their ballots. They're already gone. California doesn't send out their ballots to people for another month, October the 5th. I'll get to some of that stuff a bit later on. But that's what I wanted to just share with you. And now I want to get to the second bit of audio from Joe Biden from Friday, which I think is the more important one. Well, it is important, as the first one is important too. But this one is the one that didn't get played at all, surprise, surprise, in the corporate news media. Because the corporate media, for a long time now, does not any longer talk about the issues that affect you, the everyday person in this country. The corporate news media is all about personalities, who won and who lost, who's up and who's down, what poll is this, what poll is that. That's the corporate news media. They never talk about your issue. They never have a broadcast where they're doing some in-depth report on your issue. It's rare. And if they do it, it's just once and then they're off and they're gone and you never hear about it again. But the issues are so huge. And you would think, well, you would expect a more competent corporate news media, well, a more competent media would talk about things like healthcare, the fact that Donald Trump is in courts right now in Texas trying to get rid of pre-existing conditions. And he will lie and say, oh, no, I'm not. He is. The lawyers have been trying to do that for the better part of a whole year, even not two. There's gutting of Obamacare, there's cutting of Social Security, I've talked about it many times, and a number of other things these guys want to do. It's a really dangerous thing, and people now have to focus on what Joe Biden is saying here. Donald Trump has done nothing with this economy. He's done absolutely nothing with this economy but tank it. And this is what Joe Biden is going to be saying in this clip. Take a listen to this.
This has been around for more than 130 years, through pandemics, wars, depressions. West End has been here for generations of people. We're just looking for a chance, not a handout. Just a fair shot at a good job, a safe place to live, and a better life to pass down to their kids. This is a special place for the Biden family. My daughter Ashley, a social worker, was a caseworker here, helping young people who were aging out of foster care. When my son was the Attorney General, Bo came here, right here, to learn more about job training programs for those working toward a GED and a certificate for a good-paying job. When I was senator and vice president, there were plenty of economists I had around me to talk about every aspect of the economy. But I always think about the people who walk through the doors here, working people, white, black, brown, Latino. What are they doing? Are they okay? I knew if they're okay, as they walked through these doors, the economy was doing okay. If they weren't okay, we weren't doing well. That's what we should be thinking about, this latest jobs report. But the report reinforces the worst fears and painful truths. The economic inequities that began before the downturn have only worsened under this failed presidency. When the crisis started, we all hoped for a few months of a shutdown would be followed by a rapid economic turnaround. No one thought they'd lose their job for good or see small businesses shut down en masse. But that kind of recovery requires leadership. Leadership we didn't have and still don't have. And as a result, economists are starting to call this recession a K-shaped recession, which is a fancy phrase for what's wrong with everything about Trump's presidency. The K means those at the top are seeing things go up, and those in the middle and below are seeing things go down and get worse. It's no surprise, because at root of this is the fact that Trump has mismanaged the COVID crisis, and that's why it's a K-shaped pandemic. First, the president's chaotic mismanagement of the pandemic is still holding us back. Compared to other major industrial countries in Europe and Asia, during the pandemic, our unemployment rate is still more than double, while other nations have only gone up by half. Why? Because the president has botched the COVID response, botched it badly. I've said from the beginning, we can't deal with an economic crisis until you beat the pandemic. You can't have an economic comeback when almost 1,000 Americans die each day from COVID, when the death toll has reached about 200,000, when more than 6 million Americans have been infected, when a million more worry about getting sick and dying as schools and businesses try to reopen. We all know it didn't have to be this bad. It didn't have to be this bad to begin with if the president just did his job. If he just took the virus seriously early on in January and February as it spread around the globe. If he just took the steps we needed back in March and April to institute widespread testing and tracing to control the virus. If he provided clear national scientific-based guidance to state and local authorities. If he just set a good example, like social distancing and wearing a mask. It's not too much to ask. But it's almost like he doesn't care. He doesn't affect him because it doesn't affect him or his class of friends. Anyone with a big enough checkbook can get rapid tests on demand. If you don't, you might have to wait in line for hours and wait for weeks to get your result, if you can get them at all. If you have the kind of job where you can work from a laptop at home, remotely, risking getting COVID is very small at work. This job report shows that 37 million people reported teleworking in August. But if you work in an assembly line, or a checkout counter, or a meatpacking plant, or drive a truck, or deliver packages, you're at much greater risk. And the job report shows that more than 27 million workers reported that they couldn't work or lost hours because their employer had to close or lost business due to the pandemic. If you can hire a private tutor or have a live-in childcare, you can balance being a parent and remote schooling. If you can't, you have to do your job and be a teacher all at once. Jill and I have held briefings on reopening of school safety 2 days ago. Asking the question is, we hear so many parents call and ask us, educators as well, who feel like they're in an impossible situation. What are they supposed to do with our children when the president has made it so hard for schools to reopen safely? What's the alternative when it's devastating to keep them isolated from their friends and their support systems? I also said earlier this week, to the shock of many, that we lost more cops this year to COVID than on patrol. It's a reminder how an already dangerous job, law enforcement, has gotten more dangerous because of Trump's mismanagement. What may be just as shocking is many other jobs have also become dangerous due to COVID. Being a healthcare worker is now more dangerous than ever. We've lost hundreds of them this year because they weren't protected from COVID on the job. Being a meat packer is more dangerous than ever. So many have died due to getting COVID at work. Work for waitresses and waiters and transit workers, all have become more dangerous with so many dying of COVID. Ladies and gentlemen, no matter what he says or what he claims, you are not safer in Donald Trump's America. You're not safe in Donald Trump's America, where people are dying at a rate last seen when Americans were fighting in World War II. Donald Trump's malpractice during this pandemic has made being a working American a life or death work. And while there's a disproportionate impact on Black, Latino, and Asian Americans and Native Americans working class communities, white working class communities are being hit hard as well. Opioid deaths, for example, are up during the pandemic, another crisis that Trump continues to all but ignore. In the meantime, Trump and his friends have strong views about what the rest of America should do. Quote, cut unemployment benefits to force people to go back to their jobs, end of quote. Defund Social Security and eliminate Obamacare in the middle of a pandemic, end of quote. Reopen public schools without resources or guidance. Reopen Main Street business without protection for workers so corporations can continue to soar. This is their plan. Second, and similarly, the economic pain remains unrelenting for millions of working people of every race and background who aren't getting relief they need. Meanwhile, both are doing just fine, some better than ever. This divergence in fortunes is unique to any recession in recent memory. And the painful truth is, we just have a president who just doesn't see it. He doesn't feel it. He doesn't understand. He just doesn't care. He thinks if the stock market is up, then everything's fine. If his wealthy friends and donors are doing well, then everything's doing well. If corporations see their valuations rising, then they must be hiring. But the best economists know what I know. I've learned growing up in Scranton and Claymont, Delaware, up the road, places where folks aren't invested in the market like wealthy Americans. A measure of our economic success is the quality of life of the American people. And if your stocks soar as families teeter on the brink of hunger and homelessness, and our president calls that success, what does that say about what he values? When you see the world in such a narrow prism, it's no wonder he doesn't see nearly 30 million Americans on unemployment. 1 in 6 small businesses that are closed right now. He doesn't understand what life is like for people walking by their boarded up shops. Educators afraid that doing their job, that job they love, will bring the virus home to the people they love. Or a parent searching for health insurance now that the furlough has turned into a layoff. It's no wonder he doesn't see the single mom forced to wait in a 3-hour food line. So for the first time in her life, so she can feed her family, because she's now part of the 1 in 6 households with children that don't have enough to eat. He wants us to believe that we're doing better, to keep it up and not notice that this remains the worst economic situation since the Great Depression. And our country faced a historic divergence in our way of life. Which gets me to my third and final point, and what the American people really need to understand. All the pain and suffering stems from President Trump's failure to lead. His sheer inability and unwillingness to bring people together. He likes to sign executive orders, actions for photo ops, but they're ill-conceived and could do more harm than good. He says protecting renters from eviction. That's what he's doing. But he's not giving them any support to pay the rent when it comes due. Millions of Americans will ultimately be left with the terrible choice between eviction and living in the streets, or paying back rent they simply don't have, when there was an answer offered and rejected. He says he's continuing to provide enhanced unemployment insurance payments, but he cut the amount that everyone on it received, leaves them on the edge when it runs out in a few weeks or sooner. He should be doing his job of calling congressional leaders together immediately to get a deal and deliver real results for the American people. This is the first president in the middle of a crisis I've never seen has called Congress into the Oval Office. If I were president, that's what I'd do, and I'd get it done like previous presidents. Rentals, food, unemployment assistance, tens of millions struggling Americans, student loan relief, small business support, and aid to schools and state governments that are going bankrupt. And as long as this pandemic and the accompanying economic catastrophe persist, no one should have their water or power cut off because they can't afford to pay the bill.
That was Joe Biden on the economy. And he is telling you, this guy has done nothing. Donald Trump has done absolutely nothing. Even Newsweek, back in the earlier days of Donald Trump in the White House, had a cover that said Lazy Boy on it. And Lazy Boy was the headline on that cover of Newsweek. And it had a photo, a picture, an artist rendering of Donald Trump in a Lazy Boy recliner eating Cheetos and drinking Coke or something. It's unbelievable, but it's the truth. All this guy does and all this guy has done is play golf, tweet, lie, watch Fox News, and hate people. That's really been all Donald Trump has done. And just campaign. He's not done anything. He's not done anything. And Joe Biden there is illustrating the kinds of things that this guy should be doing and is not. Whether it's the Defense Production Act in full, whether it's all these things that you heard Joe Biden talking about there. Donald Trump is an absolute failure. He's a failure. And he's dangerous. That's why it's so important that you get out there and vote. Because if you don't, you will never be able to vote again in this country. And I am not exaggerating for effect. I mean that. You will never be able to vote again in this country if you do not vote now and get this malignant narcissist out of the White House. He has got to be excised the way you excise a cancerous tumor from someone's body. I mean, this is going to have to happen. It really will. And the only way it can happen is if you vote early.
I'm Christine Romans in New York. The economic slump may linger. Half of the members of the prestigious National Association of Business Economics said growth won't recover until 2022. A majority don't expect the jobs market to fully recover until 2022 at the earliest. Worse, they forecast a 1 in 4 chance of a double-dip recession. It's a reminder that the stock market is not the economy. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ have hit record highs, but millions are out of work and emergency stimulus has expired. The worry now, a so-called K-shaped recovery that widens the gap between winners and losers.
Since the media does not talk about the issues when it comes to politics, the issues that affect you, I'm going to spend a few short moments to talk about the reality of what Donald Trump has done to the economy. You've heard the clip from Christine Romans about the economy not getting back on its feet again in this country for at least another 2 years. I mean, 2022. During the summer of that year, according to people who are credible board analysts for the economy and that kind of thing, they say that this is going to be another 2 years of economic misery. And there's no way that you can have that in this country. We are really in the midst of a Republican Great Depression. And Donald Trump has done so much damage to this economy. Do not get seduced by the stock market. It has nothing to do with the economy. The stock market is all about rich investors and the companies that they buy stock from and how those companies are doing. And what those companies are doing have nothing to do with how you are doing. I mean, that is the most important thing to remember whenever you hear Donald Trump talking about, the stock market. And he tries to make it seem that the stock market is the economy, but it is not. It has no relationship to the economy. GDP does. How many houses are being built? Look at manufacturing. Look at houses. Look at the amount of houses that are being built. That's gone down over the last few months. There have been staggering drops in the building of houses. But you notice that the things that are being built are corporate offices, stadia. Los Angeles recently, there was a new stadium that had just finished being built in Inglewood. Inglewood in Los Angeles, for the Los Angeles Rams, the football team, the NFL team. They have a brand spanking new stadium that cost, what, $1 billion or $2 billion to build? And not far from there are people on Skid Row, homeless. 25,000 people at least, homeless. That's the problem that we have in this country, this huge disparity. Don't you think some of that money could have gone to helping find those individuals on Skid Row houses to live in? This is what Donald Trump has done to manufacturing. This is from Joe Biden's website, joebiden.com. The tax cut that Trump had put into place encouraged offshoring and investments overseas, not in the United States. Foreign investment was outpacing domestic investment. In the first 18 months of Trump's presidency, the rate of federal contractors offshoring jobs more than doubled. In 2018, stock buybacks were at record highs and corporate tax payments were at record lows. So these corporations were not paying tax at all, or very little tax. Amazon paying no tax last year. In 2019, U.S. manufacturing was in recession, and Trump's much vaunted China trade strategy ended up contributing to a decline in American manufacturing exports. That's just a few of the things that Donald Trump has done to damage this economy, to destroy it. He is catering to the extremely rich. And don't get me wrong here. Don't misunderstand me here. It's not just the so-called yahoos and the openly racist people, white people who are voting for him, and some black folk as well, voting for this guy. It's not just the everyday person. It's these very rich people that are voting for Donald Trump. They voted for him in 2016, and they are going to do it again. The vast majority of these rich top 1, 5, 10%ers are going to vote for him again because they're going to put their pocketbook ahead of the country. They're going to put their own selfish, well, I did well, ahead of the rest of the country's well-being. They put themselves before the country. And I'm not saying that you can't vote for something that you've seen in your life that benefits you. But you've also got to vote, don't you not, for the well-being of the country you live in? I mean, that's how I vote. I don't know about you. I don't vote just for myself. I also vote for the well-being of the country, for everybody. It's not a country of me. It is a country of us. And you're going to have these rich people, very wealthy, most of them are going to vote for Donald Trump again. So it's this misnomer that his supporters are just these boisterous, loud, ignorant people. These yahoos, these racists, these white yahoos jumping up and down in a building with no mask on. His supporters are the people also that you do not see. The people who are wearing the suits, they go to work every day, they sit near you in the office. They're doing, they're in the stock market all the time. That's who is going to vote for him. Make no mistake. He has benefited them and them alone, and he's invested foreign entities at the expense of everybody in the country, the average working person. Now, what Joe Biden is going to be doing in terms of manufacturing, he really wants to do things that are kind of like FDR. He wants to have a Buy America program and invest $400 billion into that, having clean new energy jobs and infrastructure. He wants to retool and revitalize manufacturing in this country, and he wants to get more businesses owned by black people, by white women and all kinds of other women, Asian, Native, black women, Latinas. He wants to add at least $300 billion into investing in research and development and new technologies. He wants to build that kind of infrastructure. He wants to have an investment in all of America, and he is going to have a widespread, universal investment in communities to deal with infrastructure and planning and training and procurements throughout all different kinds of communities. What he wants to do is create at least 5 million new jobs in manufacturing and innovation alone. This comes from the Biden website, joebiden.com. That's what I'm reading from. And it's called The Biden Plan to Ensure the Future is Made in America by All of America's Workers. He has a lot of other plans on his website. There's a lot to read here. I mean, if you are a reader, though, you will like this. Part of his Build Back Better plan for jobs and economic recovery for working families. It's a very comprehensive plan, and it does have detail. It has money, it has detail, budgets, everything. I know the vast majority of people aren't going to read it, but over the next few days, I am going to be reading. In the near future, I'm going to be reading about this so that you know who you're voting for when you vote for Joe Biden. And then I will go to Donald Trump's website and I will look at what he's proposing to you. And I will tell you why that is all a lie. Because I can fact check all of this, and so can you. This is really detailed. And for a long time, there had not been any detail. But Joe Biden, over the last few months, has put out a lot of plans and a lot of detail. So just a primer for you to start with on Joe Biden and his plans, contrasted with the disaster and what we've seen in evidence with our own eyes from Donald Trump in these first 3.5 years. Let's hope that after we vote early, that we won't have to be thinking about any more about Donald Trump whatsoever, except to see him in handcuffs.
Do you hold Russia at all accountable for anything in particular? And if so, what would you consider them that they are responsible for?
Yes, I do. I hold both countries responsible. I think that the United States has been foolish. I think we've all been foolish. We should have had this dialogue a long time ago.
That was the so-called commander-in-chief in July of 2018 in Helsinki. Right next to him was Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump calling the United States foolish. What person who calls himself the president calls his own country foolish? When have you ever heard that ever happen before? Ever in the history of this country? No person in the White House has ever called the country that he is running foolish. And certainly not on the world stage. The fact that Donald Trump would do this at any time, let alone with Putin standing next to him on the world stage, should really give you pause. Welcome back. We are now 58 days away from the presidential election. But that does not mean that you wait until November 3rd to vote. In fact, you can demand a ballot right now. Very, very important. And I'll get into that in just a few moments. But first, what I would like you to do is listen to this audio. This is from Friday. Again, something that is not being talked about a lot in the media, but on this occasion it was on CNN. Really important words that you should listen for in this report from Diane Gallagher on CNN.
On this day, ballots for the election are being sent out. That would be in North Carolina. Demand for absentee ballots has more than tripled over the number requested back in 2016, when now President Trump carried the state by about 4 percentage points, a little less. That could explain, of course, why the president's trying to sow a little bit of confusion and mistrust. He doesn't like this mail-in voting. Remember when he was in the state of North Carolina earlier this week, He told his supporters, vote twice, mail your ballot in, and then show up to vote again. That's not exactly what he said, but he suggested something that would be illegal. State officials were quick to point that out. CNN's Diane Gallagher is on the ground for us in Charlotte today. We keep saying Election Day is 2 months away, but not really. The process starts today.
That's right. And look, John, they're sending out absentee ballots today. You said that it's triple what they saw in 2016. Well, at this point in 2016, compared to what we have now, more than 16 times the number. We're talking more than 640,000 absentee ballots that have been requested in the state of North Carolina so far. And you know this, they have until the week before the election to request them. So this number is just going to get bigger and bigger. Now, state election workers in North Carolina say they are ready for this. They've been preparing for this. They've upped their staffing. They have people who are making sure they send it out. They also have a ballot tracking system. So exactly what the president suggested, on top of being illegal, it's unnecessary because they can go online and track their ballots. But there are concerns about just how many people are going to, send those ballots in. North Carolina is a postmarked state. So as long as it is postmarked by Election Day, up to 3 days after Election Day, they can continue counting those. And even more interesting, maybe not, depending on what you feel, but come Election Day, we may not know the actual winner. And that's because we're looking at these election ballot requests right now, John. More than 50% of those 640,000 requests so far are from registered Democrats. Only about 16% from registered Republicans. Usually in the state of North Carolina, Republicans actually outnumber Democrats when it comes to requesting absentee ballots. So we are seeing a shift in this state. The good thing about North Carolina is they are able to process their absentee ballots as they come in. They tabulate them all on Election Day. Some states can't do that, meaning that we probably aren't going to have results on November 3rd.
Nope. I think, Diane, we're going to be up November 3rd. We'll get as far as we can, and then we'll be up the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th, probably still counting votes, but that's okay. That's okay. That's what we do. We count them until they're done. Diane Gallagher, very much appreciate the reporting. And again, the election process beginning today in the state of North Carolina.
So North Carolina, as I've alluded to before, is a hotbed of activity, and you heard the report. At least 55% of those, or 51 or whatever, percent of people who are asking for these ballots are Democratic voters. This is North Carolina, a key state that Donald Trump is keeping his eyes on. And as you heard, Donald Trump had won in 2016. So this is really a critical piece of information, but you don't want to rest your laurels on that. You want to make sure that you vote early. And by the way, all of this stuff that Donald Trump was saying about North Carolina and, you have to go in and check with the office to make sure that they've tabulated your vote. Well, you can track your ballot. You don't have to go into an office to see if they've counted your vote. Every one of these websites, and I'm going to continue to update my list, which I hope you've seen, and I will continue to have links to it in the liner notes. It's also pinned to my Twitter page as well, so that you can take a look at it there. It's being updated. I update it on a daily basis. And one of the things I'm going to be updating it with is with the Track Your Ballot link for every single state. Every state has, pretty much, every state has a way that they track your ballot, or that you can track your ballot. And it's all online. All you have to do is go to one of these Secretary of State's websites. And the Secretary of State website for any one of these states has some kind of link to it that says track your ballot. California definitely does. And I'm going to be including the links to all 50 states and DC for tracking your ballot, so you don't have to go hunting around for it. So stay tuned and be on the lookout for that. But voting early is the thing, and there's lots of things that you have to be aware of, and I talked about it, of course, yesterday, in yesterday's episode. Vote early. My 3 things: vote early, in person preferably, be proactive, and share information with family and friends. That's critical. All 3 of those things are my 3 things to remember. And I think there's three other things that I think are very important here that you've got to consider. Registering to vote. Now, I had someone give me some feedback about whether or not there were areas you could check your registration. So I directed the person with a link to the long list of places and offices and deadlines, all kinds of things where you can check your voter registration. So I am happy to report that every website, pretty much every one of the Secretary of State's websites, do give you an opportunity to check your voter registration. And I, in fact, will be I've already started this with a few states in the A's, Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas. These states I have, and other A states, if there are any other ones I can think of off the top of my head. I cannot at the moment for some strange reason. Arizona is the other one. So there's 4 A states, right? Arizona, Alabama, Alaska, and Arkansas. 4, as far as I know. Maybe that is 4. And so I'm going to start with all of those. I've already started putting track your ballot, will be doing so. And I also encourage people to be poll workers. Very important. Very important, particularly if you're younger. If you're under 40, I'd encourage you to be a poll worker. It gives you the energy, and it can get stressful, but it's a really good civic duty to be a poll worker. So you see what's going on around you and familiarize yourself with it. Don't forget to early vote, because again, the key to winning this election is voter turnout. Voter turnout. I don't care how many people look at polls. That's why polls don't mean anything. That's why you ignore polls. Because polls are not indication of turnout. They never have been. I don't care what any pollster tells me. I refuse to believe it. Polls are not an indicator of turnout. They're not. They're an indicator of a snapshot in time. Whenever that poll was taken over, however many days that poll was taken, that's what it represents. Nothing more, nothing less. People start to get down to business right now. Not on November 3rd. Don't wait until November 3rd to start voting. And by the way, demand your ballot. Please do it now. Every state now is fielding requests for ballots. So right now, if you are going to vote absentee, which is the same thing as a mail-in vote, they're both the same thing. And you can ask any Secretary of State about this. If you are, if you are a person who is voting absentee, you need to be asking right now for your ballot. You can use the links that I have in my document, or you can go to other places and try to find the information yourself, or you can consult other guides that people have done, journalists have done. You can do all of that if you want. But one thing you cannot do is sit on your laurels and wait for things to happen. You've got to make them happen. And one of the things you've got to make happen is voting early. As I said, if you vote early and do so in droves, in an unprecedented and historic turnout, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be in the White House in 2021. It's that simple. So early vote, please. There are things to remember. One of them is to register to vote. If you haven't already registered, please do so now. Do not procrastinate there either. Registering to vote is the most important thing, because if you're not registered to vote, you're not going to get a chance to vote. So keep that in mind. And if you are a new voter, or if you know a new voter, please tell them what the ins and outs are. It's very important. Very, very important indeed. So register to vote. Please do that now. Don't wait. Check your voter registration. I would check it every week, if not twice a week. Once at the beginning of the week, once at the end of the week. So I think that's important as well. And then finally, demand, as I said before, demand your absentee ballot right now. If you have to go down to the county board of elections, then go to them and say, hey, look, I'd like to have my ballot. When's it going to be ready? Ask these very forward-thinking, proactive questions that compel answers from public officials. I think that's a really good thing you should do. Do it respectfully, but make sure you try to get an answer and be firm. This is your voting rights they're playing with. So be free enough to say, I want this. I want this. I want these things to happen, meaning I want there to be a real semblance of democracy and not anything else. And I'm going to stand tall to try to protect it, not run away to another country when the going gets tough. No cutting and running here. No matter what. We have to work really hard with the stakes so high. We have to really work hard because every one of these next 58 days must be invested by you in something to do with voting. Whatever it might be, you have to do it. Not doing it is certain failure, which I don't personally think there's going to be, but we have to make that so. Grace Panetta of the Business Insider on Twitter is Grace_PAN, as in Nancy, ETTA, a really good reporter. She does politics and elections for Business Insider, and she tweeted out a thread on Saturday, which I have reproduced on my Twitter page at the Popcorn REEL. She did some really important things, talking about ballots and the importance of making sure that your ballot is properly marked and not damaged or anything like that, or you make this mistake. It's incredible what she had to say in this thread, and I would love to have her on to talk more about this because it's so important. There are so many little mistakes that everyday voters make. And I know you're getting a lot of information thrown at you. I'm part of that by giving you this long list of things, but it's important, which is why it's important to orient yourself now to a mentality to vote. Because let me tell you something, there's going to be lots of information thrown at you and it will panic you. Or it could panic you. But Grace Panetta, Grace_PANETTA. What a thread. And I've got it again. I've reproduced it on my Twitter page at the Popcorn REEL. What Grace Panetta looks at are the 5 most common mistakes and errors that can get your mail ballot challenged or disqualified. And she also advocates solutions how to avoid making these mistakes. And this is according to election officials and experts. So please read this thread. It's very important. She gives solutions, 5 mistakes that can disqualify your November mail-in ballot and how to avoid them. And remember, there are teams of lawyers, particularly on the other side of the ledger, as it were, but particularly on both sides, but mostly on the other side, who are looking or ready to do battle before there's even a single vote counted. So the same is true everywhere across the country. It's a really toxic atmosphere now. But Grace Panetta really did do some really good work here. And I will have to read this thread. It's a long thread. And she gives solutions about how to avoid having your ballot rejected. A lot of people, we can all be passionate about voting for Joe Biden. But if you don't have the mental acuity to understand, or if you rather do not have the mentality, that's the better word. I apologize for using the word mental acuity as if there's something wrong with people. I'm talking about if you don't have the mentality to see how serious this stuff is with these ballots being rejected, forget it. You will be played. And what's happening right now, thanks to Grace Panetta, is this real eye-opening thing. 1% of all mail ballots cast that arrived at elections offices were rejected. That's over 318,000 domestic mail-in ballots. That's in 2016, according to the Election Assistance Commission. So this is something that is no joke. You also see a familiar pattern. That this has been going on in a lot of poor neighborhoods, Black and Latinx, poor whites. I mean, this is a great thread by Grace Panetta, and I don't have the time to read all of it now, but the first thread is called New Deep Dive from Me, a look at 5 of the most common mistakes and errors that can get your mail ballot challenged or disqualified altogether, and how to avoid them according to election officials and experts. Thread. So it's a thread, and it's a really good thread. Really good thread. There's a lot of chicanery still in this country. We've got to admit that and acknowledge it. And we've got to start really moving for change systemically in every other place otherwise. So, this is a really important election. And now is the time to demand your ballot. Please, your absentee ballot. It's the same thing as mail-in. Don't be confused by that. And make sure you really do invest in trying to make this world a better place. It's the only place we really have. I'm going to leave the last word with someone that you, I'm sure, are fully aware of. But first I want to say thank you very much for listening. This has been The Politicrat. And now, a very important word about what you must do in early voting.
This president and those in power, those who benefit from keeping things the way they are counting on your cynicism. They know they can't win you over with their policies. So they're hoping to make it as hard as possible for you to vote and to convince you that your vote does not matter. That is how they win. That is how they get to keep making decisions that affect your life and the lives of the people you love. That's how the economy will keep getting skewed to the wealthy and well-connected. How our health systems will let more people fall through the cracks. That's how a democracy withers, until it's no democracy at all. And we cannot let that happen. Do not let them take away your power. Do not let them take away your democracy. Make a plan right now for how you are going to get involved and vote. Do it as early as you can and tell your family and friends how they can vote too. Do what Americans have done for over 2 centuries when faced with even tougher times than this. All those quiet heroes who found the courage to keep marching, keep pushing in the face of hardship and injustice.